Thanks for joining us in our journey of talking with God. Our goal is to encourage people to pray more often and to shed the stigma that talking with God is complicated or has some special formula. There is no special sauce. God, our Father, is there to listen to us in all seasons. Whether you're in a happy mood or maybe you are facing some struggles and find yourself angry at the world, or even God Himself, He is still there. Each week we bring you a single prayer from a single person. They can choose to remain anonymous or provide their identity. That part is not important. What is important, however, is their prayer. We all pray differently, and our goal each episode is to show you how this one person prays to God. We hope you enjoy your time here with us. If you do enjoy the content, then please subscribe to our podcast for future episodes. Thank you for joining me again in this journey of prayer and learning God's will. I just want to take a moment to say thank you. I'm extremely humbled by the reception I get when I share this podcast. Each person that I reach out to is welcoming and interested and encouraging. It helps ease the grief that I've internalized when the guests that I set up have, things that happen. I don't get upset about that or anything like that. Life comes first. This is just a small thing, and I don't expect people to just drop their responsibilities to be on here. But at the same time, it also makes me doubt myself. I get this thought in my head like, am I doing what God wants me to do? Or then I also think, well, maybe I'm thinking too small with the podcast. Like, prayer is very important, but can it be more? So I'm going to have to pray on that. I have no plans to stop. It's not that. I know when to recognize doubt versus going down the wrong path. But what I want to do is pray for God's direction and where this needs to go. And can I ask that you pray for me too? I started this for a multitude of reasons. I want to help people grow closer to God in whatever way He commands. And for me, this is one of those ways that just lay heavy on me. And it works in my talent scope. We all have talents. We don't have the ability to do anything, and there are probably some things that we shouldn't do, and I know the things that I'm not good at and a lot of the things that I am good at, and this rests within my talent wheel. But if I'm being completely honest and transparent, which I promise I always will be, I started this for me too. When I started this, I was not in the same position that I am in now with my prayer life. I pray now more than I ever have in my life. And I'm also more comfortable with praying in ways that I had never been before. And so that kind of stuff got me thinking, why was Jesus so comfortable praying to God? Yes, part of it is that He is God, but He's also man too. So I went back through the sermons that our pastor has done on prayer, and something he said made complete sense to me. And we've talked about this not only here, but in general when I talk to people. Pray like a child is what he said. And that light switch clicked because I have a better understanding of who Jesus is, the relationship that He had with God, than I did 5 years ago. And one of the realizations is that He really is praying like a child. So let's kind of dig into that, because when I get something on my mind, I'm kind of like that squirrel from Ice Age who's like really obsessed with the acorn, and it'll do anything to keep that acorn safe. And well, I'm that way when I have a nugget of information. So I focus on that, and that's exactly what I did. So let me share with you what I already know, and then let me share what I've discovered. So what I know is that God, who we call Father, is unique amongst the world religions. God did not need us to exist. God did not create us to be slaves for Him. God wasn't lonely, and He didn't decide that, He just needed some friends to come and hang out with. These are all things that gods from other religions require for their godhood. But if you remove those things, they have nothing to stand on. So I also know that God, our Father, is exactly that. He wants a covenant relationship with us. God created us and gave us free will. He could have created us as slaves or robots, but then honestly, why would he create us at all? There would be zero purpose for our existence because God has and is everything he needs. He is completely self-sufficient and does not require us at all. I'm sorry if you feel that, God needs you to exist so that he can be God, but you're wrong. R.C. Sproul said this. He said, "The very word authority has within it the word author. An author is someone who creates and possesses a particular work. Insofar as God is the foundation of all authority, he exercises that foundation because he is the author and the owner of his creations. He is the foundation upon which all other authority stands or falls." So in short, our creation is a glorification of God. So what did I learn? Well, I had to learn what Jesus was saying before I could understand why he was saying it. So let's look at the Lord's Prayer, because when we consider the Lord's Prayer, a lot of times we think of it as exactly what the disciples asked for, right? Teach us to pray like you do. But it's also so much more than that. See, in Matthew chapter 6, Jesus tells us, pray then like this. It's instruction, right? He's showing the disciples, this is how you pray. And the disciples were given an intimate look at the communication that Christ had with God that no one else in history has. And yet they still didn't entirely get it. So to get there to where Jesus is showing them how to pray, Jesus actually instructed them how not to pray. In Matthew 6, verses 5 and 6, he instructs the disciples not to pray like the hypocrites. These are people that love to stand and pray in the synagogues so that everyone can see them. So let's pick apart those instructions so that we have a better understanding of what Jesus means by that. Because Jesus gives us that not so that we can criticize those people who do that, but so that we can recognize them and pray that God moves their heart from hypocrisies to genuine action. They're misguided folks who have long prayers using big words in their big voice, and those are great. Sometimes that is required, but that should not be the only way that we view prayer. It should not be, I'm doing this because if I do it exactly this way, God's going to hear me. It doesn't work like that, and we'll go into that in a minute. They're misguided from using those words because you don't see them use them anywhere else but in prayer. Jesus is basically warning us not to put on a show in prayer. He's saying that God knows what's really in our hearts, so we should vocalize that instead of saying what we think he or other people want to hear. God knows. We just want to vocalize it. And there's a reason why he does that. Part of it is the communication that we have, and I've talked about this in past episodes, is God will provide, but you have to ask for it. You don't just think about it and have it in your heart and just expect God to deliver. Part of your communication with God is the supplication, which is where you're asking for a favor, or asking for his grace or his favor. You're asking him to move in some specific way. It's a version of submission that says you are the creator of everything, and these are my needs. We also have to give those needs with the realization that they're not going to be answered the way that we expect sometimes. Another thing that Jesus tells us in verse 6 is that when you pray, don't heap up empty phrases like the Gentiles do, for they think that they will be heard for their many words. And that is the genesis of why I started this podcast, because God doesn't have some video poker machine that he spins and he says, well, if Karen says these words during her prayer, I'm going to give her what she wants. Heaven's not a casino. It doesn't work like that. And God's already provided the greatest provision we need. He's given us his son. The Bible says that in verse 8. It says, do not be like them, for your Father knows what you need before you ask him. He's given us the provisions that we need. He knows what's on our heart. So these two things, this praying to be seen by others and then using these words as filler, these are two things that are complications we as adults have injected into our prayer life. And it's also what we seem to expect from others. As humans, we have this need to be communal. And you'll see it, if you're in a room and one person stands up to applause, even if the other people around don't really feel that moved, they're going to get up and applaud too. We're built that way. And so we've basically shaped what God intended prayer to be into what we think it should be. And evidence of that is right in the Lord's Prayer. The prayer itself is simple and broad in the words Jesus uses. It is something a child can and would pray about. Forgiveness in a blanketing nature, because it's a prayer for humanity at scale. We, in our daily lives, we focus on personal connected matters a lot of times. And sometimes we feel like we need to pray using big words when we're talking about those things, as if that would somehow impress God. It's kind of hard to impress God. He's created everything. So Jesus didn't need to do any of that. He did none of that. Instead, what he did is he glorified God first. Hallowed be thy name. He was submissive in placing God's will above his own. Your kingdom come. Your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. He asked for supplication. The daily bread, give us this day our daily bread. That's the daily grace that we get from God. He was humble in asking for forgiveness of humanity. Forgive us our debts as we have forgiven our debtors. And meek in asking for protection. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. So what I want you to do is pause this, take out your Bible or open the Bible app that you're using, go to Matthew chapter 6, and just spend some time reflecting on the Lord's Prayer. And you'll see that none of it is complicated. It's straightforward. It is honest. It is a prayer that removes self from that prayer and is more about others. Those things, children pray in that manner. So I think there's at least 3 ways that we can pray like a child. If there's others after you've listened to this and you realize, well, I do these things because it's very much like how my child would pray, then please reach out to me, on any social media platform, whatever podcast platform you're on. There'll be a link to a contact form. Just reach out and let me know, because life is a journey of eternal education, and something may work for me that doesn't work for you. Maybe you've got something that may work for others, and I would love to share that. So the first way that we can pray more like a child is also one of the things that make you kind of do a double take as an adult. You're standing in line or you're somewhere public and your kid says something, you just kind of look over. Did that really come out of your mouth? And it could be simple things like, look, mommy, look at that lady's butt. It's huge, right? Kids, they say the craziest stuff, and a lot of times they say exactly what they think. Even if we're just like, no, don't say that again. It happens. In fact, Psalm 145:18 tells us, the Lord is near to all who call on him, to all who call on him in truth. So the Bible is instructing you to talk to God in truth. And I feel like a lot of times, especially those times when we're afraid of disappointing God more than we already have, like we know we've done something wrong. And it really is just, you're coming to your dad and you're like, I did this, or I did that. And what we try to do is actually try to pray around that issue. We try to mitigate it in our mind as if God doesn't already know, and he does. And I catch myself doing it, and then I have to remind myself what I do tell my kids, that it's better to admit when you've done something wrong than to lie, find out that you were lying, and that you had did the something wrong, whatever it may be. You're exacerbating your problems. You're making it worse. God knows what's in your heart. So just tell him, speak plainly to him. If you feel your life just sucks right now, let him know. If you're angry at him even, and unjust as that may be, let him know. Because he doesn't need that filter. He's a big boy. He invented words. You speak because he allows you to. The words that you speak are words that he already knows that you want to say anyway. So one of the things to maybe help ease us into having those more honest conversations with God is this. A lot of times, getting that anger, that fear, that woe, that pain off of your chest is the first step in putting that weight down and letting God handle it. And that's the biggest step. It's the hardest step. I struggle with that all the time. I try to control stuff that I have no right or no means or way of controlling. But when you take that and say, God, this is how my day's been, and I need your strength to help me persevere through this. I don't want you to solve it. I want you to resolve me so that I can make it through, and that I can see why you've got me going through this. The second way that we can pray more like a child is to untangle ourselves from the borders that we put around our own thinking. Jesus prayed for humanity in the Lord's Prayer, and he can because he knows the power of God, because he is God. Shortly after the transfiguration in Matthew chapter 17, we see Jesus cast a demon out of a boy, and the disciples ask him why they couldn't do that. And Jesus rebuked them and told them that their faith was so little. He told them that if they have faith as small as a mustard seed, they could move mountains. And the same instruction applies to our prayer life. If we have something on our hearts, we tend to be bound by our rational thinking on how it can be resolved. But a child, on the other hand, they're a dreamer. Their imagination is so flexible and their brains are sponges. Once you get older, you lose a lot of that imagination. And so when a kid is young like that, they often hope for things that to us is like impossible. Like, we've got real world experience. You can't breathe on the moon without a suit. So what we do is we take the power of God and we try to stuff it in this neat little box that we can comprehend. And what we really should be doing is saying, I don't know the answer to this, but you do. And so, God, can you help me understand or show me that this is your will, and give me peace in understanding that? Because God is more powerful than any kind of wall that we try to create for ourselves. So just to circle back, the first way that we can pray more like a child is to pray honestly, pray with no filter. God understands what's in our heart. He knows what's in our heart. And a lot of times vocalizing that helps us move past our doubts and step into the strength that he can give us. And then the second way is to remove our borders of thinking and instead say, I don't know how it's going to be resolved, but I've got faith in you because you've created everything, and I don't understand that plan, but I'm willing to step out on the limb, walk it, even though it may bend. I know it won't break because you created that limb for me to walk on. And then the last thing is something that I try to do in my personal life. The acronym KISS, or Keep It Simple Stupid, really resonates with what I do professionally. I take highly technical information a lot of times and I have to simplify it and give that into bite-sized pieces to different people in the organization. Well, our prayers are similar. They don't have to be elaborate. It can be as simple as asking God to help you love people well, or thanking God that your coworker brought some strawberries and you get to have some strawberries on your lunch. Literally, it's the little things like that. Our prayers can be simple and straightforward, especially for those we know, right? Because we've shared life. And I've got a friend. He's a retired and disabled Marine, but we've shared a lot of life together. I've known him a little over 5 years, maybe even 6 years now. But we've shared our pain and our struggles and our heartache with each other, the things that we experience, our families. They really are pretty much like family. I really don't consider them friends. I would consider him a brother. But in either case, I pray for him every single day because he knows and I know the struggles that we both have. I can go for weeks or months not talking to him, but I know that I can send him a text really quickly and just say, I was thinking about you, brother. I love you, and leave it at that. I don't tell him that I'm praying for him because I don't seek that recognition. All I'm trying to do is show him love the way that Christ told me to. Ephesians 6:18 says to make supplication for all the saints. In the Bible, when we see the term saint, it's used to identify Christians. The verse is from the part of the Bible that we call the whole armor of God, and we're instructed to never stop praying, especially for others. And I try to do that. I don't let anyone know. If someone tells me about something they're going through, I write that down in my prayer journal. I pray about it, and I keep it in there, and I keep praying about it until I get a good report from them. And that comes back to the patience of prayer that we talked about last week. You have to keep doing it. And you do that in faith because you do see changes, and you can get discouraged. But if you look at the long term, 3-4 years, you see that God's moved, and it's so humbling. So there's 3 ways that we can pray like a child, right? We can speak to God honestly with no filter. He doesn't need that. We can untangle our mind from the box that we try to put God's power in because we try to rationalize things, and instead become dreamers and pray to God for great big things. We don't know how he's going to deliver them, and it may not be the way that we expect him to deliver it. But the fact is that if you ask God, he's going to answer your prayer. It's just that simple. The Bible tells us that. And then lastly, keep your prayers simple. Don't use big words. Say simple things. Will you pray with me? Father, thank you for the grace you give us every single day. You are perfect in ways that we can't understand yet. And yet you give to us so freely, and you've created a world that your glory is on display for us to see. Allow our hearts to focus on keeping our prayers simple and direct with you. Honesty is vital to how we see you. And if someone listens to this, and I hope that they find comfort in knowing that you hear them just as clearly as you hear me or someone else that prays daily. It doesn't matter if we take a break for 4 years from speaking to you. Allow them to understand and feel in their heart that you're still there no matter what. If we become self-serving and pray only to be seen by others, then humble us and set us right like the good Father that you are. If we think something is too impossible to overcome, then put it in our hearts to seek you and remind us that you created everything with just words. Allow that power to weigh on us and turn our hearts from thinking you are not powerful enough to meet our need. Instead, give us simple clarity and the strength to lay it at your feet and let your will be done. Father, let us love everyone we meet well, even if we disagree with them, and to be grateful for the little things and to lean on you for the big ones. I pray we become more like Jesus and do great things in your name as we fulfill the Great Commission. You are an awesome Father, and we love you. Amen.
Thank you for joining us today on Talking with God. We hope that by sharing this prayer with you, that you are encouraged to pray more often, become comfortable with praying anytime, and most importantly, your relationship with God grows in talking with Him. We would love to see you subscribe so that you get notified of the latest episode. Share our vision and spread the word that God is there to listen to you, no matter the time, place, or circumstance. If you would like to share a prayer to help our mission, please email us at talkingwithgodpodcast@gmail.com. We love you and hope that you visit us again next week.